Hey everyone, Jake from 8020 Automotive here. Today we're talking about P0234 Turbocharger Overboost fault codes. A P0234 fault code essentially means that the amount of boost that your turbocharger is creating is higher than the amount of boost that the ECU is trying to target. An overboost condition is significantly more serious than an underboost condition because sending too much boost into your engine can do serious damage to the engine's internals. So leaving a P0234 code unchecked could do some serious damage to your engine and to your wallet. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about overboosting, what controls boosts, so that then we can talk about the common causes, the signs and symptoms you'll get alongside a P0234, and then we'll finish it off with a quick diagnostic checklist or steps that you can follow to try to determine specifically what the issue is. So to understand a turbocharger overboosting, it's important to understand how a turbocharger actually works and what predominantly controls the boost levels. So boost levels are commanded by the engine's ECU or the engine's computer, but it's actually the wastegate that is located on the turbocharger that's responsible for actually hitting those boost targets set by the ECU. So the wastegate is essentially a valve inside the turbocharger, and what happens is that valve opens and closes to allow exhaust gases to basically bypass the turbocharger. So once you hit your desired PSI or boost levels, the wastegate opens up and then all of that air starts to bypass the turbocharger so that you don't continue to build more boost pressure. So what's happening when you're getting an overboost condition is that wastegate is not actually opening, it's remaining closed, and so the turbocharger is continuing to spin and continuing to build boost pressure even though it shouldn't be. More often than not, a P0234 fault code is caused by issues with the wastegate. Let's go ahead and talk briefly about some other signs and symptoms that you'll get with a P0234. So alongside a P0234 overboost, you're likely to get a loss of power in your engine entering limp mode, and that's because overboosting is very dangerous. Usually when the car detects that, it's gonna go ahead and put itself into limp mode to try to prevent any damage. Additionally, you might notice very erratic acceleration or spurts of power, and you might notice some sounds like knocking or pinging, and if you hear knocking or pinging sounds, that's a bad sign that your engine's internals are struggling with the boost pressure that's being delivered to it. You might get some other fault codes, and that's important to keep an eye out for diagnosing this issue. One common one that you might get is also a P0243 fault code, and that is for a wastegate solenoid malfunction. So if you have a P0243 alongside it, it's a pretty good indicator that you have a bad wastegate solenoid. So with all that out of the way, let's talk about the most common causes. Like I mentioned, the wastegate is the most common cause because the wastegate is ultimately what's controlling boost pressure. And there are a couple different components of the wastegate, like I mentioned, with the most common one being the wastegate solenoid. The wastegate solenoid is an electronic component that basically gets the signal from the car's computer or ECU, telling it how much boost it should be producing. And from there, that solenoid is then going to go ahead and control the wastegate actuator to open and close the wastegate inside the turbocharger. So if you've got a bad solenoid, the wastegate actuator is not going to be opening or closing like it should, and that can lead to an overboost condition. Secondly, the wastegate actuator, which is the little arm or linkage that opens and closes that wastegate, can get stuck, it can go bad, and that can be the problem too. If that linkage gets really stuck, it can get stuck closed and cause the overboost condition. So let's go ahead and talk about what some of the other possibilities are if the issue isn't with the wastegate. The first most common thing to look at here is tuning. If your engine is tuned, whether you're running an off-the-shelf plug-and-play tuner or you've got custom tuning, your tuning setup is going to be the most likely cause of an overboost situation. So if you are tuned, especially if you're custom tuned, this is extremely important to make sure you're working with a reputable tuner so that you don't run into these overboost issues. If you're not doing tuning, if you've got a stock engine, other than that, it could be your MAP sensor or your manifold absolute pressure sensor. If you have a bad MAP sensor, that can lead to overboosting conditions as well. And then the third thing on my list is going to be specific to diesels that use VGT or variable geometry turbochargers. Those turbochargers have what's called vanes, and so it's possible for those vanes to stick. So if you've got sticking vanes, you'll get an overboost condition as well. But that's specific to VGT turbochargers, which are predominantly used on modern diesel engines. There are a couple different types of turbocharger systems problems in wastegate setups, whether it's a pneumatic or a fully electronic one. So what the replacement options are, if it is a wastegate issue, is really going to vary depending on what your vehicle is and what your turbocharger setup is. But for the majority of modern vehicles, wastegate issues ultimately mean that you need to replace the whole turbocharger, because both the solenoid and the actuator are electronically controlled and they're integrated into the turbocharger in most cases. In some older vehicles and older turbo setups, you can have an external solenoid that's actually serviceable, and sometimes that wastegate actuator is serviceable as well. So ultimately, in a lot of cases, it means a new turbocharger. But because the solenoid is electrically controlled, there could be some electrical issues going on to where your engine is for some reason trying to command crazy high boost pressures. And so when it comes to diagnosing what the actual cause is, this is what you're going to want to do. First, you're going to want to go ahead and get a scan tool or a data logger or some type of tool where you can read actual boost pressure against target boost pressure. And this is just important to know if maybe the car or the ECU is commanding an insane amount of boost. The turbocharger is working totally fine, but the ECU is just throwing some crazy numbers out of there. So what we want to do is make sure that the actual target boost is reasonable and see what the actual boost being produced is, because that can help point us into specific directions depending on what that looks like. And if you're able to data log it, you can actually see what happens to boost pressures over the graph or over the log, and that's helpful for diagnosing what the potential cause could be. The second thing that you'll want to do is use an advanced scan tool to try to command the wastegate solenoid yourself. What you can do is use the scan tool to command it and visually inspect the turbocharger wastegate and see if you can see the linkage or the actuator moving like it should. If you're using a scan tool and trying to command that and you're not seeing any movement at all, then that's a pretty good sign that either your solenoid is bad or the actuator arm is stuck and not moving like it should. Third on the list, you're also going to want to have a scan tool for this. You're going to want to read your map sensor readings and just make sure your map sensor readings are reasonable and not way off of where they should be, because a bad map sensor can cause overboosting as well. And that would probably in this case be like the best case scenario, is you just have a bad map sensor and need to go ahead and replace that. Where you go from there really depends on the type of turbocharger system that you have. We need to make sure that the wastegate solenoid and the wastegate actuator are functioning properly, because if they are functioning properly, then we've got some sort of electrical issue or electrical problem with the ECU that's causing this. If they're not functioning properly, then we've got a bad solenoid, a bad actuator, and you're likely going to need to replace the turbocharger unless either one of those components is individually replaceable on your turbo setup. My last note here, again, is if you're running custom tuning, that's the first place to start. Anyways, guys, that wraps it up for our video on P0234 Overboost codes. If you guys appreciate this video, please click the like button, subscribe to our channel, and stay tuned for all our future diagnostic content.